Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool kind of fan-driven review for you guys from Joseph Bonnie. Now, I recently did a genuine Tropic Strap feature, and riddled throughout the comments were folks just singing the praises of Joseph Bonnie Tropic Straps. So, of course, I had to heed your guys' warnings and reach out to Joseph Bonnie. They were kind enough to send in a couple of samples to include even their Bonklip Bracelet, which was actually really cool. So I'm happy to share those with you guys. A little bit about the brand. They're self-described as a team of passionate Frenchies based in Paris who strive to go against the ever-changing trends of fashion to deliver timeless creations. Now, the fact that they are playful enough to refer to themselves as Frenchies, as an American, I love that. So their kind of business model is they're a web shop that's born out of an online magazine, now providing either locally French sourced JB branded products or well curated third-party goods such as vintage wristwatches to pair with their straps. So we're going to be looking at their rubber Tropic as well as their Bonklip bracelet. I have a few different options in terms of I tried to make it a little bit more diverse. Of course, we got a blue dial, we got a black dial, we've got a silverish white dial, and some different styles, right? You're getting Swiss made, you're getting a micro brand, French micro brand from Baltic, and then German from Junghans with that really timeless Max Bill there. And I think timeless is definitely going to be the key when it comes to these straps. So I definitely wanted to key into that with the watches that I would be presenting them on. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. All right, so I mean, with what started it all, let's start there. It's this Tropic Strap that I kept hearing so much about. So some standout differences that this Tropic Strap has over and advantages over some other Tropic Straps that are out there. So number one, it is slightly shorter. So those of you with smaller wrists, you're going to have less access and they're sticking out. For me with a larger wrist, it didn't really, the larger, longer ones didn't make much of a difference. But on this one, they're going to fit pretty much just about perfect for a 7.5/7.25 inch wrist. Really nicely finished here, guys. You can see vulcanized rubber is what's used, really clean. I do like that they kept these portions here, the lining within scale to the lining here on the side. And then also very surprising, which I don't think anybody mentioned, was how nicely finished. Although it's a very simple buckle style, check out that dual finish, guys. It has a beautiful hair, fine hair style brushing there with a wonderful polish here on the top side. So really cool. Like, I would have never expected a really neat finish like that. I mean, this isn't milled, which isn't, it's not a huge setback. It is nice when we do find things like that, but these are slightly more affordable than what you're going to find out there, only $63. So there are definitely more expensive options that are out there. There are more expensive options that aren't even branded Tropic Straps. So this was definitely a really nice surprise, and I will say the way that this comes together ergonomically, which you'll see later on, was really nice and very surprising. The reason why I went with the black as well as the gray is because I feel like those are two options. People always want to know like how far apart they are in terms of how black versus how gray, and I will say that these are really nice. You could probably own them both, because this gray is a true gray. It doesn't look like a faded black like you might find with some other options that are out there, that would consider more of an anthracite color. This is a true gray, which I think is great because it's going to match with grays as well as black, and then I think it really offsets with blue really nicely. But honestly, gray kind of goes with everything, right? Because the steel is gray. But you can see there, it's very nice. Another feature that's really great about these Joseph Bonnie Tropics is that the weave pattern that's on there is really pronounced. So it's very 3D, so it's very raised. which is something you don't always find. And if it is pronounced like that, you don't always find it as sharp. So they've done two things there. They've made it, higher definition, but also very deep. So that's really nice. I dig that. And that's something that, I think you can kind of understand in terms of quality, the fact that they were able to not only make this texture more pronounced, but also still have it executed very sharp. That's really nice, especially considering that, again, these are not the most expensive ones. And then they do have, of course, the rolled edges, and that's not a new feature. That's something that they've always had. Can't always say that for some other models that were pretty much trying to really key in to the vintage style that had more of a chopped end. So that rolled end definitely looks better. I mean, of course, when you're looking at it straight on, you can't really tell, but when it's on your wrist and then it drops and drapes a little bit, you having that rolled edge definitely is more aesthetically pleasing. So these are really great. Let's get into some things you can see maybe a little bit better on the gray option. Let's check that out. Very clean. They actually come with two different keeper styles. I chose to stick with these two. I probably have a big enough wrist where I could have used the single. So there's basically two smaller ones, or there's one that's kind of like two put together, essentially. And then it doesn't have, of course, the seam in the middle. But those options are available. I chose to kind of stick with something a little more classic with the double keeper here. Looks great on this glycine. This is a 39 millimeter. And it's just really clean. And this isn't super old school looking. I mean, obviously it's meant to be more classic, but it's not really super retro in its execution. And I like that, the gray definitely adds a little bit more of a contemporary look in terms of pairing. And then, of course, the classic black, guys. I mean, if you're going to have a Tropic Strap, you should have it in black. There are some other color options as well. But getting into some of the lore around Tropic Straps, they were really a symbol of deep sea exploration from the beginning of the 1960s throughout the end of the 70s. The Tropic Strap has equipped most of the legendary dive watches that are out there. It's the official strap of the earliest Rolex Submariner, Blancpain 50 Fathoms, JLC, Memovox Deep Sea, and its distinct design is also kind of the privileged companion to the skin divers of that remarkable period. So right when dive watches were new and skin diving was such a huge craze that was catching on, these straps were part of that. And it's one of those things where you got a brand like Baltic that do a great job of just capturing that classic vintage aesthetic while still bringing it forward, into modern day. I really like that. And these straps have definitely, in terms of their execution, how supple they are, it's definitely been brought forward into modern day standards. So I really dig that. Now, in terms of some of the technical details, these go for $63. This is, of course, vulcanized rubber. You do have a nice kind of lustrous effect there to the finish on here, which is nice. And it does play into the fact that it does have this great texture. So you can see, similar to carbon fiber, I'm not saying this looks like carbon fiber, but if you've ever looked at carbon fiber, the weave and the way that it's going to catch light and give it some dimensionality is really, really key. And it's really stands out the most on the black model because you're going to get such high contrast, versus on the gray, it's going to be a little bit more subdued when you look at that kind of 3D effect. It's not necessarily going to be quite as pronounced. Still there, but not quite, again, not quite as dynamic as you're going to notice on the black. That little sheen is nice. On the long end, you're having 120 millimeters. On the short end, it's going to be 75 millimeters, and these are available in 20 millimeter sizes. You can get it in black, night blue, olive drab, charcoal, ivory white, or Florida orange. Florida orange sounds awesome, and their blue ones look great too. Again, this is going to be considered their charcoal, so a true gray, which I really, really like. So if you're going to go for the black, I think if you're going for the black and you want something that looks a bit faded, because of the way that the light plays off this, you know, similar to this dial, right? It's a black dial, but you can see when it captures light, it goes into more of a, you know, a gray tone just because of the way that light reflects off of it. Same here, so you can get the same effect with the black one, and it's a pure black, but because of how dynamic it is and the way that it plays with light with that texturing, it makes it a lot more versatile. So you can even have a dedicated gray strap here as an option, and it will just be, you know, a true gray, so you don't necessarily need it as an option to look like a patina or a fade type of gray, because it's just a pure and nice clean gray on there. So really nice and very, very clean. Now let's get to the surprise of the show, the beautiful Bonklip that we find here on my Junghans Max bill with sapphire. I really love this, and I'm a huge bracelet guy, and I have to say that this one actually suits the watch really, really well. So if you have something with that kind of Bauhaus design language, or just something kind of turn of the century, very early, this suits it really well, and it's ultra comfortable. I'm sure, as you can tell by the jingle jangle of it, it's definitely a comfortable layout in terms of the wearability. But a bit about this bracelet: after the absence of more than 50 years, the Bonklip is back. Yes, legendary and truly unique stainless steel bracelet that comes to you today with refreshed proportions. And I do like that they did refreshed proportions, because these were typically much thinner. And here you can see, even though it's a 20 millimeter lug, it's actually about 18 millimeters wide. A lot of times you're going to find these thinner at around 16. So that 18 millimeter width looks really great, and you don't even need a taper with that thin of a width there, which is great. And I think it really flows really wonderfully with the lines of this case and the dial. So this was actually, you know, in terms of back to the proportions, which have been updated, but it still definitely preserves that certain elegance and comfort and the lightness, you know, that really built the reputation of this type of strap being kind of a grab and go. It's kind of in between a bracelet and a strap, and you're going to see that when we get this on wrist, because you can see it's extremely pliable, and technically everything in here, it's rolled, so these are hollow. They're not solid, but they're not cheap hollow. They're hollow by design, right? It's not hollow because they're trying to have the look of something that's solid. It's hollow because it needs to be to actually use this design. So these designs were originally created in the UK in the late 1920s, where the Bonklip bracelet was designed as a unique size, you know, that unique size adjustment, which is really great. And it's really endlessly adjustable depending on what length you get. This is the extra large length for me, just because I have quite a large wrist, and I did want it to wear proportionally and not be, you know, have it sitting offset if I was to get the smaller one. So it worked out for me. The Bonklip is often associated with the first Rolex Viceroy bubbleback, and other watches worn by the British Royal Air Force pilots, and was manufactured by the most prestigious bracelet makers, including Gay Fairs and JB Champion. So this goes for, in between, depending on what size you get, $100 to $108, and that's not much for a steel bracelet, a stainless steel bracelet. Some of you might be thinking, because of the style and the execution there, with things being rolled and hollow, that it might not be worth it. But I will say, this does not feel cheap. It just feels engineered, which I can absolutely appreciate. So in terms of this, you're going to get a little bit more options, because you can get it in 18, 19, or 20 millimeter end links. And then it has a 19 millimeter connecting link. And then, so actually it's slightly wider. It's 19 millimeters with this polished portion right here, and then 17 millimeters on the brush center links. So effectively, visually, it's more of an 18 millimeter, which is pretty cool. I definitely dig that. It's brushed. It does have a small little clasp on here, right here, as you can see, that is brushed. And this thing is really cool. So it can actually expand really, really wide, because it's a closed loop system. So you stick your hand through, and of course I got a meaty hand. Gonna go ahead and lay it right here. I've been more so wearing my watches a little bit higher above the wrist bone. I'm gonna take this end here, and what I'll do is I will unclip so you can get it at an angle to stick it, and you tuck that in, clip it down, and then now you can see evenly spaced. You're gonna have essentially 2 rows here, and then single row, and check that out. That looks awesome, and I really dig that. So of course I get a little bit close and there might be some lens distortion. I mean, this is a relatively small watch, so probably less lens distortion in terms of it looking more oversized, just because it's actually so well sized. But what I'll do is I'll bring the camera in a little bit tighter here, just so we can get an idea of how this is going to look, so you can get some details on it without getting any of that extra lens distortion. So look at how centered it is on the wrist, and look at how well everything lays. It is just really nice, very comfortable, and even wearing it higher on the wrist, it doesn't feel like it's going to go anywhere or move. And when it moves with you, right? So there's going to be enough room for it to flex with the rounded shape of your wrist. So I really dig that. Everything's very clean. You can see the brushing is really nicely done. And because of that, again, it helps it not feel cheap. It just feels well engineered. Some of you might, still feel like, oh, it's a little tinny or chintzy. But for me, it just, I'm blown away with how balanced it is and how comfortable this is. So really fantastic from that standpoint. And so there's 2 lengths. There's the standard length essentially, and then there's the extra long. I got the extra long length. Check the links in the description. It gives you more kind of measuring tips in terms of which one's right for you. But everything lines up really beautifully. And this is an all polished case, and you can see that it still flows really well because you're getting polished elements with some brushed elements really well integrated. So that looks fantastic. Let's actually get this one here on the wrist. Classic black. And you're going to see this is a little bit of a shorter clasp. Of course, reaching around the tripod, I'm going to fumble it a bit. But let's get it in here. And then you can see I don't have much extra on there, but that also means that if you have a smaller wrist than me, you're not going to have a huge tail sticking out showing on this end, right? Like you can see it all tucks underneath the wrist. So for those of you with smaller wrists, let me give it a quick wipe here. Probably wipe off the Junghans while I'm at it. So wears really beautifully, and then again with that more vintage style, probably good to wear it kind of more old school, higher up on the wrist. And then let's actually bring in the camera a little tighter so you guys can get a look at it without the distortion. That is beautiful, and check out how the light plays with that dial. That grainy texture plays really well with the texturing on the strap itself. So really quite handsome, flows really well. I gotta say, really impressed. And what I'll do is, as a demo, I will do this here so you can see how the shape of this buckle really does help keep things tidy. So you can see on the finger portion, there's a little kink in there. Let's pull this back out really fast so you can focus on it. So see that big kink? So it's gonna have that, and then you put it in. So I was at the 3rd hole from the end, and that's another nice thing about these straps is the holes go all the way up, all the way down. So if you have a large wrist or a small wrist, you're pretty set. But you can see the way that that's going to hold, it actually keeps this portion at a really nice angle, so that when it's on you, it actually is quite tidy, which I like. I like that they went through that extra kind of design process to say, hey, let's make this also ergonomically quite friendly. And then of course, looking at it in the gray tone, it's just a little easier for you to probably see some of those details in terms of the finishing. Very clean lines. You're not going to get a bunch of mold lines. There's going to be some faint lines there, but again, for the price, very, very impressive. I think it really classes up this glycine little 39 millimeter diver, and you can see, of course, it just is right at home with this beautiful Baltic aquascape, aquascaf, either one, whatever you want to call it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. For those of you that were commenters that recommended Joseph Bonnie, big props to you guys. Thank you. I think these are a great option. You know, I don't, out of respect for the brands, I'm not going to do any type of death match, but these definitely are really, really beautiful. Very, very pliable. I'd say slightly more structured than the Tropic branded ones, which can be for some overly soft. So if you have a smaller wrist and you wear a mechanical timepiece, sometimes you don't want your strap to be super soft because you're going to need it to be able to hold its form to really keep your watch planted on your wrist. So that's something that, you know, I don't really think of because I have larger wrists and I'm used to wearing watches within a wide range, you know, from larger chronographs to smaller three-handers. And because of that, you know, that's not something that I really need a lot. I prefer something to be very soft and supple versus it being, you know, super structured in terms of, you know, giving you some stability on the wrist. So that is something that maybe is underappreciated by my wrist, but will be heavily appreciated by somebody with a smaller wrist, having that extra structure. But you can see, because of how this tapers, you're going to have very pliable down here while having the thicker portion to make sure that you're holding and centering this really wonderfully on the wrist. So these are really great products. Joseph Bonnie, big fan now. Thanks again, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do it like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.